Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MTGO Traders. My name is Taryn, and let's talk about the first standard deck tech of Ravnica Allegiance season, Mono Red Aggro. Now, there are a ton of new deck lists coming in the following weeks to this channel, but I wanted to get out of the way as soon as possible the most insanely fast deck, Mono Red Aggro. You know we had to talk about this one. I'm sure this is also the deck you'll see the most in testing right now. Yes, it's that fast. But of course, before I get into the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more content just like this, and hit that bell icon to be notified when new content hits the channel. It keeps the lights on here and keeps me making content. Alright, let's jump into it. First up, creatures. It should be no surprise to anyone, but as new sets come out, we have new cards to include in toolbox decks just like Mono Red Aggro. And a new creature that I really love for the new format that's tearing it up in testing is a 4 of 10 Street Dodger. This 1 mana 1/1 with haste has an added ability that makes him basically unblockable against 99% of all decks. The best part about the Dodger here is that it works so well for us if we're needing just to get in that last 1 or 2 points of damage to close out a match. A lot of players here prefer to play Runaway Steamkin in this slot, but this deck is about being fast and turning your deck off for a turn 2 mana 1/1 in hopes that it stays around long enough to be a larger threat for extra mana on the board feels kind of bad most of the time. 10 Street Dodger is a 1 of 3 inclusions into this deck list from Ravnica Allegiance, and it's amazing. The others, of course, we'll talk about when we get to spells. The rest of the creatures in this list are all aggro as well, with 4 Fanatical Firebrand, 4 Gitu Lava Runner, 4 Viashino Pyromancer, and 2 Goblin Chain Whirler. Firebrand is here for indirect damage, as it can be used to ping an opponent or an opponent's creature. Firebrand luckily does really well against the mirror match too, being able to ping away a Pyromancer or Dodger. However, Firebrand also has haste, making it another premier turn 1 play. Gitu Lava Runner here can be a turn 1 play as well, however he doesn't have haste immediately, needing at least 2 instant or sorcery cards in the graveyard before getting that +1/+0 pump and haste. While Lava Runner may not be an ideal for turn 1, he does turn on Wizard's Lightning in the deck, and we'll talk about that much later when we hit the spells. Lava Runner can also just be a 2/2 with haste in the mid-game as the match goes on, since you've dumped your hand by around turn 3 or 4. Viashino Pyromancer may not look like much, but hitting for 10% of your opponent's original life total for just hitting the board is quite ridiculous. The Pyromancer also has 2 power, allowing for some advantageous trades in our favor, as an opponent will likely not want to take 4 damage within 2 turns from a 2-mana dork. While Pyromancer isn't flexible with implementation on the board state, it burns, and that's really all that matters. The final 2 creatures in this deck are a 2 of Goblin Chain Whirler. While not only being a brick house against Boros, Mono Blue Tempo, and other deck archetypes, this Goppo also sweeps the board state against Boros, the Mirror Match, and the now Afterlife deck list from Ravnica Allegiance. He's a godsend. I will say that I dropped Chain Whirler down to 2 due to just how narrow the implementation is though. Chain Whirler may be a house, but not being able to attack with it or deliver follow-up damage can be a real detriment to our board state. However, when Chain Whirler does get in, it's 3 points on the board on top of that 1 point that it hit as it entered the battlefield. That is it for creatures. Let's dig into our spells here. We have a total of 20 in the deck list, and most of them are just direct burn to our opponent's face. Believe it or not, but Ravnica Allegiance brought 2 new cards to this area, and it brings the lightning bolt count to the deck to 8. Ouch. While they may be situational, being able to get off the effect to get these as bolts is quite easy. So the first card included from Ravnica Allegiance is quite the no-brainer. Skewer the Critics. Now, being a 3 mana burn 3 sorcery feels bad. Like, really bad. But what if I told you this turns into a lava spike if you just hit your opponent for a single point of damage? Ding ding ding! Step right up folks, let's turn this high-costed spell into a hyper-aggressive burn spell just by playing our deck list. Not only does this turn into a lava spike, it's also incredibly easy to get off thanks to the 6 creatures that turn this ability on by existing. Chain Whirler and Pyromancer both have enter the battlefield effects, making this card nearly a free play on turn 3 or 4 respectively. Also keep in mind that this can be played as early as turn 2 if we get in with a hasty goblin. Overall, Skewer is amazing, and those that disagree don't fully understand that Lava Spike still sees play in Modern, so I don't know what to tell you. Even at sorcery speed, a burn 3 for 1 is insanely powerful. That's why there are 4 copies of this bad boy in the deck list. The other card to talk about from Ravnica Allegiance is an interesting one. It's Light Up the Stage. Now this card sort of flew under the radar in application for me for a long time, and that's because I didn't follow Talarian's instructions and carefully read the card. This card exiles the top 2 cards of your deck, and you can play them until the end of your next turn. Guys, that means that if you cast this card with no mana up, first up, if you haven't played a land this turn and you hit a land, you can play with this card. Then, if you hit a burn spell or creature, you can wait a full rotation for you to untap your lands and then cast a spell that Light Up the Stage exiled. This dynamic shift in tempo and card advantage in a burn deck is something that aggro needed for years, and we've got it with Light Up the the stage. Just like with Skewer, you need to get off a point from your opponent's life total for this card to be useful and cost effective. But since this is a burn deck, it's incredibly easy to do that. Again, 6 creatures in the deck list, get that for just indirect ping damage, and if we really need card advantage, we can actually sack our Firebrand to ping the opponent too. So that brings up our indirect damage to 10 creatures, more than half. Heck yeah. The other spells in this deck list are the usual suspects. 4 Lightning Strike for the typical 2-mana 3-point burn. It's the least effective burn spell in the deck list due to its inability to be downshifted in cost like Skewer the Critics and other burn spells in the list like Wizard's Lightning. And since we have 8 wizards in this list, getting this off for 1 mana is incredibly easy. Situational Burn in Mono Red Aggro right now is in peak flavor mode, and it's awesome. The last 4 cards in this spells list are Risk Factor, a card draw spell disguised as a burn spell. 3 mana for a burn 4 spell isn't great, but doing it once more by pitching just a land to the graveyard is pretty effective. Others have said this, and I'm sure I have as well, but the repeated effects of Risk Factor is what makes the card so good. Turn 3 to 5 we burn for 4, and the follow-up activation will likely give us 3 cards. Not only does this give us card advantage like Light Up the Stage, it gives us burn, and both being on 1 card makes it really powerful. Lastly, we've got a simple 22 mountains in the list. Nothing more, nothing less. We could opt to put in a Detection Tower if we really wanted to, but we really need the red mana, and including Detection Tower for cards like Carnage Tyrant feel a little bit like a wasted effort in this deck list. But that's the full 60, a very aggressive list that can swing with fast creatures, burn out an opponent, and also draw us a ton of value for very little mana. I love this deck list. It's incredibly good. Do keep an eye out on MTGO and Arena, as my original name for this deck list was actually Mono Red Rank. As for the sideboard, it varies from meta to meta, but here's a pretty generic list for you to help against various matchups. We've got 3 Banefire for the control matchup, uncounterable burn is important there, 2 Goblin Crater Maker for those random artifact matchups as well as good creature removal, 2 Lava Coil against Golgari and Mono Green Stompy to get rid of big boys as well as exile them, 2 Fiery Cannonade for the Selesnya and Orzhov token matchup. Cannonade also doesn't affect our Firebrand, and that's pretty nice as well, 2 Fight with Fire if we get into a long grindy matchup or need a 5-point burn spell for a creature on the field. 2 Experimental Frenzy is also here to replace Light Up the Stage if we're going against a control matchup, as Frenzy can really outpace a control or mid-range deck if the game gets into turn 6 or 7. And lastly, I put 2 Rekindling Phoenixes in this side for much needed flying damage and hard to deal with creatures. Also, you could throw out the Crater Makers for more Chain Whirlers if you need that, but I really appreciate artifact removal if and when it comes into play. So, how much does this deck cost? Surprisingly, not that much. This is only 30 tickets on Magic Online and about 115 bucks in paper Magic. It's filled with 2 mythics, 11 rares, 20 uncommons, and 20 commons. So that means it's pretty easy to build on MTG Arena as well. So with that all put together, this is why you're seeing the deck list so much as it is, since it's so easy to put together in the meta. And of course, once this set goes live in paper, this will also be the one deck to beat. Will Mono Red Aggro be a dominant deck in Standard for the next 3 months? I'm not entirely sure, but it is very powerful. We'll just have to wait and see how the meta forms in the coming weeks. I do think this will be a top performer deck for several pros, so I expect some iteration of this deck list to see the Pro Tour. But that is it for this video. I hope you guys liked the deck tech. I have a ton more spicy lists coming in the future, but I know I wanted to get this one out of the way since it was nothing but value. Like the video if you like this, and if you want to see a Mono Red Goblin list for the new format, check out my Arena focus content over on my personal channel. Thank you so much for liking and subbing, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.